Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. We pushed Brent back a day because we wanted to look at National Signing Day more in review with Brent than while the live bullets were flying yesterday throughout the day. And so with that, we welcome Brent to the program. Brent, how are you doing this morning?
Trav, doing well. Good to be with you as we have come through another signing day, and the amazing thing about it is it's quite different than when you and I were doing this together on a yearly basis. I still wonder if they're going to end up moving this to either the end of July or the 1st of August, as some coaches have mentioned. But I mean, there's still a few notable things that happened, but most of the action happened back in December.
Yeah, it did. The early signing period. I kind of compare it to, the early signing period is like that trip you make to the Publix to load up on the necessities before you bunker down to watch a full day of football.
Yes.
On a Saturday. And then the late signing period, or February, what it's become is at halftime when you kind of realize you're running out of quote-unquote necessities,
yes,
you make the run to the corner store to sort of try to replenish real quick. That's kind of what yesterday has become for us. But we're talking winners and losers for National Signing Day 2019, Brent. And, well, the SEC, I think you got to start right there. 7 of the top 12 teams in the 24/7 composite team rankings from the Southeastern Conference, 11 of the top 25. I'd say the league came out okay on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. Florida with the first top 10 class they've had in a while. They're glad to have that, and while the attention focused on Alabama and Georgia, Texas A&M quietly there at number 4, and LSU at 5 too. So and Tennessee moving up in that top 15, which is a good class for them. So the conference did just extremely well with the rankings. I'm still not quite sure what fuzzy math that Rivals had to get Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2, but we all know this is still a mythical championship. But I know some eyebrows were raised from that, but still, yes, a great day for the conference.
Yeah, I think Rivals had Kirby over Nick in the swimsuit competition of their judging.
Yeah.
So maybe that's how that played out with the Dogs getting the nod at number 1 in those rankings. Again, you talk about some schools that even throughout the course of the day sort of rebounded. What a wild day for Auburn yesterday, Brent. Starting with George Pickens, the wide receiver from Hoover, flipping from Auburn to Georgia, but then Auburn answers nicely, picking up Charles Moore, the defensive lineman from Louisville, Mississippi, to go along with Jaron Handy, another DL out of the Magnolia State. That's a very nice 1-2 punch for the Tigers moving forward. Mark Anthony Richards, a top 100 athlete out of West Palm Beach, Wellington, Florida, projects as a running back, signs with the Tigers. I'll tell you what, for all the smoke and I guess a little bit of fire under Gus Malzahn's seat going into the 2019 season, I think the Tigers did about as well as you could hope for on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, I think they probably wish they would have got a few more offensive linemen. Now again, I'll preface this as something I saw earlier on Twitter, but that Moore may be going pretty quickly to the JUCO route. I'm not sure about that. In fairness to him, so we'll couch that as a rumor until that comes together. But still, I think even the Auburn beat writers would tell you they've got a bit to go to rebuild that offensive line, and then you and I've talked a lot about the uncertainty at quarterback. But yes, they and again that they were in the top 15. And we've said for years, if you got a top 15 class, you've done rather well.
Yeah, again, especially with some of the optical issues, I would say Gus Malzahn's dealing with going into 2019. You talked about Tennessee a little bit, the strong finish there for Jeremy Pruitt, another 5-star offensive tackle added to that mix, and Darnell Wright yesterday to go along with early period signee Wanya Morris. We talked about Henry To'oTo'o choosing the Vols over Alabama, a big win for Jeremy Pruitt. Tennessee and Florida, looking at the Eastern Division more so. Georgia had a nice finish yesterday too, but Florida sort of reclaimed its place, I guess, Brent, as a top 10 class after being noticeably absent for a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. They in Tennessee jumped from 16 to 11, and that was in ESPN, and Florida went from 12 to 9. I think Mullen was very pleased with what they were able to do with this class, and I think probably rightfully so. Everyone knows about Chris Bogle, the outside linebacker who ended up going to Florida, and frankly, I mean they filled a lot of needs, particularly in their secondary, that he said they wanted to fill those. And oh, by the way, Trav, how typical is this? You've got now word that Todd Grantham from Florida, the D coordinator, Mike Elko of A&M, may be looked at for the Cincinnati Bengals in their situation too. Now, the quarterback, Elam, is who I was thinking about a minute ago from North Palm Beach that signed with Florida. But they had a good defensive class. And, listen, the two guys they got, Trav, that may help them more than anybody, John Greenard, who is a transfer from Louisville, and they also got an offensive lineman, Parker Braun, that is a grad transfer from Georgia Tech. So those two recruits may be as important as what they got yesterday.
Yeah, and it is that time of year, or the day after National Signing Day, where the coaching movement rumblings grow even louder. Now, look, with the recruiting process being pushed up basically by a month or two, you've already seen a lot of movement after the early signing period, but some finalization, I guess, of some of these moves coming to the surface, including right here in Tuscaloosa. Joe Panunzio, as widely speculated for a month or so now. At BamaOnline.com, we had heard it would be the NFL in all likelihood for Joe Panunzio, running backs coach for Alabama in the 2018 season. It looks like that will be the case. Looks like he's going to return to the Philadelphia Eagles, which you knew some of this was going to happen. You hired Charles Huff from Mississippi State, the running backs coach. Same thing for Craig Kuligowski, the defensive line coach for Alabama, with Brian Baker coming over as well from Mississippi State. So some things starting to be ironed out a little bit more, I guess you could say. Now, as for some losers yesterday, Brent, what in the world is going on at Florida State? I know that's outside the SEC demographic, I guess, but Willie Taggart doesn't sign a quarterback for the second year in a row. How does that happen?
Well, it's just unbelievable to me, and a lot of FSU fans are up in arms about this because they really right now have got James Blackman with DeAndre Francois gone. Lance Ledre ended up at Maryland instead of FSU. Plumlee ended up picking Ole Miss over FSU, and I think the more disturbing thing was when asked about this, Willie Taggart said, "Well, we've got a plan that I really don't want to talk about right now." As you can imagine, that did not soothe any ruffle feathers about this situation. Now, as badly as they need a quarterback, they've got to straighten out that offensive line too, and they got a couple of them with Ira Henry from St. Louis Trinity Catholic, and also Darius Washington, who came over too. But look, your point's well taken. I mean, this is a class, and this has been a program, Trav, that just frankly been a disaster at quarterback, and yesterday didn't help them at all.
Yeah, I guess Chief Osceola going to spring practice is the number 2. behind James Blackman.
Really?
That's about what it's down to in Tallahassee these days. It's just amazing. And I guess the Seminoles finished somewhere around 16 in the team ratings. So not a horrific class, I guess, all the way around. But even from that standpoint, you're not used to seeing – a couple things you're not used to seeing if you've been covering this as long as Brent and I have. And we started doing this, I want to say, together, Brent, in 1993. So
yeah.
It's been 26 years now that Brent and I together in some form or fashion have covered college football recruiting. Not used to seeing Florida State somewhere in the mid-teens, and I'm not used to seeing Miami down at 28th in the recruiting rankings either.
And two things with that. One, another thing with Florida State, this safety, Nick Cross, who they thought that is a commitment, is considering Maryland and FSU. FSU doesn't need to continue to lose recruits to Maryland. But listen, the Miami situation, frankly, Trav, is not much better off. I mean, right now, the best Miami is doing at this point, I think, is more with transfers like Trevon Hill, who's coming from Virginia Tech. He was dismissed from there. And then, obviously, your listeners know about Christian Williams, the four-star quarterback from Daphne. But listen, they're still having a lot of trouble at Miami. Obviously, Dan Enos is there now. They've got numbers at quarterback, but they don't have a quarterback. Let's be honest about that. So for both those schools to be in the shape that they're in is something that absolutely that we're not used to. And this is a sermon on another day, but Trav, it really affects the strength of the ACC. Does not a league that we really thought was up and coming 2 or 3 years ago, and I know we talked mostly about the SEC, but for instance, Miami plays Florida and Orlando to start the season. A league with the ACC that 2 of their main bell cows aren't doing real well right now.
No, and I understand Miami had just 17 signees yesterday, and I guess it does look like Manny Diaz is hitting up that transfer route pretty hard, right? Asa Martin coming from Auburn, Tate Martell coming, the quarterback from Ohio State, Bubba Bolden, a safety coming from Southern California. So you got to take that into account too, right? Yeah,
well, and look, right now, that's their immediate help at this point. So, and I think their future at this point, Trav, may be even better than Florida State. And oh, by the way, a quick note that both you and I will appreciate this. Their Miami spring game is on April the 20th, but they may end up doing it in Orlando because the Rolling Stones are in town on that night of the spring game, Trav. So they will have a venue close to home for that game.
Yeah, if it weren't for Alabama and Oklahoma playing in the Orange Bowl down there, they might have to dust off some seats for that Rolling Stones concert, because I don't think the Dolphins and the Hurricanes necessarily fill them all down there at Hard Rock Stadium. Brent, as we let you go here, I want to ask you specifically about Alabama's class. What did you like specifically about it? Did you feel like they came up light in an area or two? Your overriding thoughts on this Alabama class after yesterday?
Well, I mean, when you get another historic, unprecedented class, I mean, we can certainly nitpick with it, but I mean, for them to go and drop into Louisiana and get Ishmael Sopsher, and I think Saban particularly likes that, Trav, just kind of to poke every now and then and let him know that he's still there. And obviously Brian Young was a big pickup, but look, overall, it's as good a class as they've ever had, and frankly, that is saying something. And look, to have double-digit numbers of this class already enrolled just makes it even better.
Yeah, I mean, so many of these guys already on campus, including Alfano and some others. Evan Neal, the offensive lineman. That's what I continue to say to people who wonder a little bit if maybe Saban's going to lose his fastball here in the foreseeable future. When Alabama stops loading up at the lines of scrimmage, more so than any other places on the roster, that's when you need to be concerned. And Alabama, both with the offensive line and the defensive line this time around, maybe as good in both areas when you combine them together in one class as any we've seen to date under Nick Saban on paper.
Well, and I think people forget that they were even close to getting guys like Thibodeau, who went to Oregon, or in other words, if they would have gotten a couple more of their targets on the D line, Trev, it would have been the recruiting analysts would have been scurrying to find adjectives and ways to measure it.
There you go. Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News, as always, helping us put things into perspective in the SEC and beyond. We got a little bit into the ACC with Brent today as well. Give Brent a follow on Twitter at Brent Beaird, BrentBeaird. As always, Brent, a lot of fun catching up. We'll do it again next week.
Me too, pal. Take care, okay?